So as I understand, the rest of the service here will be a musical discussion. I'll be sharing some songs, some stories, and then I would welcome conversation around them or around anything that's come up in the service. As I share a song or after a song, feel free to respond and have a discussion around the themes here. So I'll start with a song. I started with a song to begin with, inspired by a monk called "I Had to Dig," and this is one that I wrote for his monastery when I was visiting. One time, he asked me to write a song for their service using their lectionary that day, and so I used the lectionary, which had to do with there were several different verses which I think you may recognize in the lyrics here that I weaved together, but one of them was our passage from Isaiah today, which was, again, "Remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." So that was one of the verses that I used to write this song. And I weaved it with those verses and my own life and journey, and I hope that it helps you in your own journey. I came to you weary and broken, condemned by traditions upheld. Their words were well-meaning and righteous, but I couldn't escape from their hell. And you tenderly stooped to the ground, addressing ephemeral matter and paying respect to their frowns. You set me free and said, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. It springs from the dust, oh you blind people. No, it is not of your choosing. Forget the former things. I'm bringing water to the wilderness. So now I count all else as useless and straining ahead toward true life. I leave in the dust every doctrine and press toward the knowledge of Christ. 'Cause no one could throw the first stone, and in this mysterious atonement, your only command was to go and live in freedom. You said, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. It springs from the dust, oh you blind people. No, it is not of your choosing. Forget the former things. I'm bringing water to the wilderness. So go now and be free. Go now and be free, my child. Go out and be free, my child. Go now and be free. Behold, I am doing a new thing. It springs from the dark. trust though you blind people know it is not of your choosing. Forget the former things. I'm bringing water to the wilderness. If you want to join in on this part again one more time, feel free. So go now and be free. Go now and be free, my child. Go now and be free, my child. Go out and be free. Forget the former things and be free. Thank you. So, any thoughts or feelings that have come up during that song? I realize it's tied with the reading and our complatio. If there's anything that you're feeling or want to express, or any questions you have, feel free to speak them out. Otherwise, I'll continue on with the next song. Mm-hmm.
What drew you into the monastery? What got you? What were the steps that brought you to the steps of the monastery?
Yeah, so I grew up in a fairly conservative evangelical upbringing, which had its benefits and its drawbacks. And I think one of the drawbacks was there were certain ways in which I think there were parts of the theology that felt dangerous to me or problematic, and I think I had I lost my faith for the first time during college at a Christian school, and I've been on a journey ever since then. That was my freshman year at college that I would say I kind of like had my first moment of real doubt in that way, and so I was always seeking ever since then, and it was right at the end of college that I think I was looking for just some spiritual rest, and when I stumbled on this monastery as a place to find some rest, it just felt like a place where it was incredibly peaceful, but also open, and it was a place where it felt like they were seeking truth and truly loving people in a way that I don't know, I felt like was lacking in my community. So anyway, so visiting a monastery for the first time was incredibly freeing and beautiful to me. I felt like there was such a desire to know and understand other types of people than our own, and at least the people I grew up with, and primarily the way of life of monks is they pray all day long and they care for the people in their community, and they've given up everything else and they say that's what we're doing, and I just think that's really beautiful. So I don't know.
Where was this monastery and did you live there?
So there are two different monasteries I've spent most of my time in. One is fairly nearby here. It's St. Andrew's Abbey, and it's in the desert on the other side of the mountains here, the Angeles Mountains. Beautiful Benedictine monastery. I visited there. I've done several nightly. I started going about once a month for a while, and I would do overnights and weekends. But the monastery up in Big Sur called the New Camaldoli Hermitage is where I spent 2 weeks living there with them, and there's a program where you basically commit to living as a monk with them for however long, and so I spent 2 weeks with them. But I've decided, partly from that experience, being a monk is not for me, but I'm so inspired by their way of life. This is my wife. Yeah, my wife Joy. Yeah, and it's not the way of life for me. But I think it's such a beautiful and inspiring way of life that we can all learn from and benefit from. So yeah, I definitely recommend if you're interested in a retreat, St. Andrew's Abbey or New Camaldoli Hermitage, the coast.
What's the hermitage?
New Camaldoli. It's a strange word. Yes, Camaldol. It's a strange word, yeah. But if you search hermitage or monastery, it'll probably come up on the map. Yeah, in Big Sur. Oh yeah. Biola University. Biola, yeah. So just south of LA here. Yeah. I'm curious if anyone connected with the lyrics in that song in any way. Was there something in your journey that it connected with? Yeah.
I think it's interesting too, the lyrics to that song, especially coming from the background you come from, which is similar to mine.
Mm.
And so that the be free part was never part of
Mm.
conservative, fundamental Christianity.
Mm.
And so it's an interesting thing that you do, putting the two ideas together. So it's a little bit jarring, I suppose, for someone from that background, but it's a good and interesting
Mm.
thing. I wonder what you were thinking with the be free. If that's something that was a challenge in your
Mm.
past that you had to learn.
Mm-hmm.
If that was the true thing.
Yeah. When you I'll answer that, but when you say if it was in opposition, like the be free is in opposition to what else in the song? Is it?
The Christ or God or
Mm.
religion.
Mm-hmm.
At least in fundamental Christianity.
Right, right.
It's probably not all religions, but at least the more conservative ones that have a lot of rules.
Absolutely. Right.
It's in contrast.
Right. Yeah. So with each of these readings, one of them was the woman caught in adultery, who they, Jesus says, "He who's without sin, throw the first stone," and he writes something mysterious in the dust. And then there's something from Paul. I can't remember exactly if it was Philippians, where Paul is saying something like, I count everything else as rubbish, and I press toward Christ, or whatever, the image of Christ, the knowledge of Christ. And I feel like he says something along the lines of like, we lay aside all the doctrines, or whatever. And there's certain things that I think there are ways of seeing these verses that I grew up with that feel very constricting, and like, but I feel like I was reading them with fresh eyes, having just kind of like, I think I had just around the time I wrote this song, I had just stepped down from leading worship at a church, and sort of left my spiritual community at that point, for several reasons, and was mourning and was in pain, but was also felt this sense of freedom that was strange. And I feel like there's ways of reading these verses where it's not, I don't think that Jesus or Paul are saying like, you have to commit to this way of life, and it's like it's a dark, painful thing to do. It's definitely like there's something beautiful about committing to something. But I feel like in these readings you see more of this, this command to like go toward freedom. Like we leave in the dust our doctrines. That's my reading of it. And we, and Jesus says, like, look, she was a woman caught in adultery, but just go. Like it's not like all of y'all telling her she's in the wrong and you got to stone her. Like that's not it. He tells her to go and be free. And he does say, and sin no more, which I see as a form of freedom. Like I think that is like, it's an invitation into freedom. But anyway, I think I felt that a lot growing up, that it was like, I felt so constricted, like, particularly growing up in conservative evangelical youth group, it was sort of like the main thing that I was supposed to worry about as a teenage boy was to not look at porn and to not and like that felt like what we were concerned about 100% was our sexual purity, and I just think I feel like the way that Jesus invites us into true life is not so much about like the don'ts, because I think you get caught in the don'ts if you think about them too often, but instead an invitation toward life, yeah. Yeah, I was curious to hear what you connected with in it.
I think you are wise and lucky
Hmm.
that you question your faith while you are questioning.
Hmm.
He and I, we met and married, and 25 years later,
Hmm.
we question and doubt
Whoa.
are very, very strict, very
Conservative
conservative beliefs. Up to the point where we think it's a cult like
Yeah.
legit, so.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. How long ago was that you guys made that shift?
made that transition
Yeah.
right before COVID.
Whoa.
I couldn't have planned it even better. Disappeared from there and show up here.
Yeah.
If they were still attending in person and I just disappeared, that would have set off flares.
Yep. That's perfect. Yeah. Wow.
I'm just, the whole thing is I was listening when I'm doing a new thing. To me, so I grew up Catholic,
Hmm.
and I am a recovered Catholic.
Yeah. Right.
But so all the rules and the don'ts, lots of don'ts and lots of, all that. And because of the way I was raised, I always bucked the system anyway. Like, that's just my personality.
Yeah.
So I never really, I carried the guilt. You're trained in guilt. So to me, some of the be free is let go of the guilt, right?
Absolutely.
But the other thing is, to me, is once I came to this church and started thinking about Christ and just thinking differently about why he was killed and all those kinds of things. But to me, Jesus was the radical, right? He was the one saying, right, the money changers, get them out, right?
Yeah.
Like that we are no longer, we are about loving people and stuff like that. So when the whole, I'm doing a new thing, to me, I'm thinking of, because Christ was that shift from the old way of oppression and castes and things like that. It was more about we're all equal, right? So when you say I'm doing a new thing, I'm
Yeah.
associating it with that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
He totally did, and
Yeah.
that's why they killed him. Basically, that's my faith or
Right.
my faith journey. Is I believe that Christ. I don't believe he sacrificed himself. I think he was murdered
Yeah.
by the people who didn't like his message.
Absolutely.
That's where
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like that's a message that we then bring continually anew now. That there's a new thing happening. And there's so many ways in which people get trapped again in systems of guilt and shame and rules and yeah, I feel like that's what we take the story of Jesus, and we bring it into our lives now and in its moment. Yeah.
it's kind of sad that loving your neighbor has to be the radical thing, right?
Absolutely.
Like loving other people is going against the grain and radical. Like what?
Wild.
That's what makes it the whole thing surreal.
It's so wild. So that's a good transition into another song here, which I feel like, especially as you talked about a cult as well, and the shift. I'm going to play another song here called "The Other Side," which I wrote as I was transitioning out of the church I was at. I think I think I was realizing more and more that I felt like I was an outsider in my church based on where I sat in my beliefs, and it was so strange to feel the language of like the others that our church would talk about, you know, oh, the people out there, the others, like to feel like, oh, you're talking about me, and to like almost start aligning myself with the other side, you know, and to feel how dehumanizing our language was in the church, talking about others. And so this song is an invitation into seeing things from the other side, and what if when you were a baby, you were born to the wrong side, and you were taught the other story, the other people's harmful lies? But what if every time you questioned, they warned you get back into line? Would you ever search for wisdom, or accept that they were right? Do you think you would be brave enough to seek out what was true? And how would you know to search for truth? What if where you sought divine love was a book of empty sounds that you were told had come from heaven, the words of God written down? But what if when you tried to leave it, you were faced on every side with the threat of endless torture and fear of being ostracized? What if in the name of wisdom you were taught all others blind? And though you only saw their straw men, you were certain of their lies? And what if violence filled your vision for the sake of proving right? And in the name of God and nation, you had taken countless lives? Do you think you could tell everyone who made you who you are, I'm trading honor for life? And what if all you knew from childhood, when you came at last to die, you discovered to be falsehood that had scraped you dry? And what if by those lies your heart turned into something like a hell? And as your eyes beheld the earth one last time, they detested every cell? Would they welcome you in heaven? Would you care for it at all if you had all your life lived in hell? But what if in the name of Jesus you had stayed true to this life? Do you think he would forgive you for your ignorance and pride? What if when you finally met him, he was different than you thought, and the box they put around him made you hate what you saw? What if God was not the person that you always thought he was? What if God looked like the other side? And what if all the while the closest you could ever be to God was to love a stranger's soul? I think that last line is why I thought, you mentioned loving people is the radical thing, and that's the closest you can ever. Of course, there's quotes from scripture and great authors that the closest you can be is to love another person. Closest you can be to God is to love another person. Anything that y'all connected with particularly in that song?
That was deep. That was really deep.
Hmm.
When the first time you played that for me, we were actually at a monastery, and I was at the beginning of like my questioning, and he was sitting in front of me, like playing this song, and I just remember feeling so many things. Even the fact that this friend of mine that I've known for a long time is now kind of saying these things and bringing up these questions that I had been having but couldn't name, and that was really significant. I just felt like everything was like breaking down in that moment. Yeah. But I also grew up in Delaware and question, and even asking that question, what if? What if? What if? What if when you were a baby you were born to the wrong side? You're kind of just imagining your whole existence in through this other lens that we don't often put ourselves in that space because we're kind of told to get back into line. And there's something beautiful to being committed to certain things and values. But I think once I started focusing more on the values and less on and I still cry every time.
I think for me, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in this church, and it had to do with our new member process. Way back when I joined the church, it was this intensive, multi-week kind of thing where current members and new people coming in, and we really just cracked open, and it was a very raw experience. But one of the things I learned, because I had certain perceptions of people coming in, like just personality-wise, I was like, oh, I'm never going to get along with that person, or whatever, right? Like things like that. And then once I learned their story, like it just, speaking of the other and just going, whoa, okay, I get why they are that, come across that way, and it totally disarmed me. And then I did the whole walking in another, one of the biggest things from me in this church is you walk in the other person's shoes. You try to see things from the other side.
Yeah.
And it gives you a certain level of sympathy and understanding that tends to dampen down any, visceral reaction or, all this stuff we've been taught growing up. It's automatic in there, right? It's habit. We jump to these, whatever. But if you try to walk in other people's shoes, it makes you far less it just changes, and you're more inclined to cut them slack or
Did you have a similar experience?
Oh, yeah.